Oh boy, it's this game!
I am so happy.
In the holiday season of 2001, Nickelodeon released a CG animated film called Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius into theaters, with decent reviews and success, which eventually led to a TV show. Now, this wasn't the first time Nickelodeon addicted kids were exposed to the character and his technological shenanigans, as Nick would air small shorts on TV before the movie was released. The plot was that our titular character, a young scientist capable of creating impressive albeit faulty machinery, sends a communications relay out into space for alien lifeforms to obtain. After friction with his parents, he sneaks out into a brand new theme park opening night and naively wishes for no more parents. Incidentally, the aliens find the communication relay and decide to abduct the parents and feed them to their chicken god. After realizing what's going on, the kids take apart amusement park rides, turn them into spaceships, and set off to save their parents. In my opinion, the film is alright. It's not a fantastic film by any means, but it's certainly not awful either. It's harmless entertainment for the kids with some additional passion and creativity behind it. However, it could potentially make for a fun video game. I mean, the premise is simple, the character opens up plenty of possibilities for developers to build mechanics around, and there's plenty of concepts and scenes that could translate into fun levels. I mean, not too long after this film, we got Ratchet & Clank, a platform game that thrived on different gadgets, and that sort of thing wouldn't be too out of place for a Jimmy Neutron game gameplay-wise. That, and this was the early 2000s, when pretty much every big animated film or license got a tie-in video game spread across the main variety of 6th-gen consoles, as well as a separate tie-in for the Game Boy Advance. And seeing how THQ had the publishing rights, you could be damn sure that there were imminent tie-ins. Despite this, upon the film's release, there was no PlayStation 2, GameCube, or Xbox game to accompany it, which is the most un-THQ thing I can think of. Instead, it was just a Game Boy Advance title and a PC release. Though, evidently, given the title of this video, a PS2 and GameCube game did come out. Almost a full year later. It missed the theatrical release, it missed the DVD and VHS release, it missed everything. Hell, if there wasn't a TV show airing by this point, there would be no reason for people to pick this up based on brand recognition. Something licensed games have a small tendency to desperately rely on. Okay, maybe if it took this unusually long for a tie-in game to come out, that'd mean it would be good.
No.
This game was developed by the tremendously short-lived Big Sky Interactive, a company formed by ex-members of the American branch of Callisto, the company that made Theory of the Furries on the Amiga, Pac-in-Time, Nightmare Creatures, and so on. However, those games were made by Callisto's home base in France, and the US branch was more so just a previously existing software house renamed after an acquisition. After Callisto went bust, the former heads of the US branch formed Big Sky and made 2 games, this being one of them before just completely vanishing. It's actually not too easy to find information about these guys. Though I did find this description on the cutting room floor that amused me. Both games had the same surreal quality to them, with bad character models, odd lighting, droning audio, and feeling nothing like the source content. Basically like creepypastas minus the supernatural and death-related elements. Which, of course, leads us into the presentation, and after being greeted with what is possibly the laziest title screen I've seen in a 6th-gen game, we start this game and observe its graphical prowess.
Just another day in the life of Jimmy Neutron.
The graphics in this game are absolutely atrocious. I would say that this game looks 5th gen, but no. Here's Miss Pac-Man Maze Madness. Here's Rayman 2. And here is Jimmy Neutron with graphics only made possible by the sheer power of the 32X. Sega does what Nintendo don't. What's even weirder is that the PS2 version is just barely chugging along. I mean, good God, the PlayStation 2 is more than capable of handling a game with this graphical fidelity without even breaking a sweat. This should be running no problem, and granted it appears to on the PAL version, but I guess if there's a Neutron, there's a way. The GameCube version, on the other hand, runs at a solid 60 frames per second, and the graphics are a lot cleaner, but that just ends up highlighting just how uncanny the models and the animation are even further. However, the PS2 version does have something the GameCube game doesn't, a featurette on the development of the game. I've always loved this sort of thing in games, and seeing how terrible this game is, I am beyond curious to see what's in this. Quite bizarrely, this video is just over 40 seconds, and no, it's not a 40-second clip of someone continuously banging their head on a keyboard. Probably because that's not terrifying enough, and we need the featurette to reflect the game somehow.
To create the game, a staff of highly trained technicians first mapped it out on paper, kind of like a board game.
Hey, what you doing?
Yeah, I was making some concept art here. It's pretty artistic, you know. The eyebrows, those are very important. We're actually thinking about having an eyebrow level.
Roll the dice!
What are you doing, man?
Alright, so we get the game piece out, and we move the game piece 5 spaces, and the first one to land on my nipples wins!
What have you done to my artwork? It's ruined!
It's kind of like a board game.
No!
It's kind of like a board game!
No!
Then they went into 3D mode to add texture, characters, and tons of action-packed gameplay.
So you draw the game out, then you put the drawing into 3D mode, and suddenly a game is done? I mean, I know this was written with kids in mind, but not only is this a hilarious simplification, but if anything, it's proving to be more misleading than informative, which raises the question as to why you made this video in the first place.
Hello, Daddy?
Well, hello. Son.
I drew a video game today. Can you put it in 3D mode?
Sure.
Oops, I'm late. Jimmy needs his Rocky back. Got a blast.
As far as sound goes, the sound effects range from acceptable to droning and irritating. The voice acting is rather variable. The returning voice cast from the movie and, at this point, show do a fairly good job. However, a lot of the voice cast didn't reprise their roles for this game. Petty fools, they don't know what they're missing. In their place are largely people who aren't even trying. Like, actually, this is some of the most comically bad voice acting I have ever heard in a game.
Thank you for rescuing me, Jimmy Neutron. Boy, am I tired.
What happened? Where am I?
What? Jimmy Neutron? But this can't be!
You mean that wasn't just a dream? I really was captured by aliens?
You've made me so mad! I could just boil!
The music, on the other hand, I'm actually kind of like. Some of that is nostalgia, but the music is actually easily the best part of this game. Some of it can sound a little cheap, or maybe even repetitive, and it's not always a particularly exciting soundtrack. However, it can also have a very atmospheric electronic sound to it, and that's nice to see once in a while. I just like to see it in better games. Regardless, it's definitely the highlight of the game. As far as mechanics go, it sounds like you have a lot on paper, but the execution just makes it all feel incredibly bare bones. On his own, Jimmy can run, jump, kick, and talk to people. However, he can also pick up additional weapons such as bombs and bats, in addition to gadgets such as the Shrink Ray and the DeviantArt Fetish Ray. Gar can also shapeshift into vehicles for Jimmy to ride, such as the snowboard, the pogo stick, and the I seriously can't control this scooter. As far as controls go, scooter notwithstanding, they're not particularly great, but they function enough. Though the uncanny animation will never cease making them feel even more awkward than they already are. Despite that, there are some idiosyncrasies. Talking to people can feel very finicky, attacks seem to only work 50% of the time, and the pause menu will just randomly decide that it wants to be extremely oversensitive today. But what about the physics? They're fucking exquisite. This game can physics. This game can physics 9 times. So yeah, at this point the game doesn't seem particularly unplayable, just ugly and rather unstable. However, then we get into the camera angles and level design. The game would be flawed enough if it weren't for those things being a problem, but not only are they a problem, they completely destroy this game. To start, this game implements a fixed camera system, and if you hear someone blab on about how adjustable camera systems inherently suck and how fixed cameras are what need to be used all the time, show them this game. It will debunk their entire argument. While fixed cameras are a perfectly fine system to use, these people are clearly oblivious to the fact that what camera system you choose reflects what level design you'll get as well. If a game has linear or otherwise streamlined level design that doesn't require the camera to diverge from a set path in order to follow the action, then a fixed camera will work great. However, in a game, say, like Jak and Daxter the Precursor Legacy or Super Mario 64, where you're put in expansive environments with a lot of exploration and a lot of freedom to go wherever you want, as well as the game being built around finding things in the environment and experimenting with it, an adjustable camera is beyond the ideal fit. Even if the goal is to get from point A to point B, but the levels still open up in a way that makes more use of three-dimensional space, a fixed camera is a beyond stupid idea unless you're really talented, and I think you see where I'm going with this. Imagine playing Super Mario 64 with Crash Bandicoot's camera. Now imagine it being a lot buggier, uglier, and designed a lot worse. And you're not far off from this piece of shit. Sadly, that is far from the only issue with this camera, as the camera angles they picked are absolutely horrendous. At least in a game with an adjustable system, if you get a bad angle, a lot of the time you can, gasp, adjust it to give you a better one. Here, you get bad angles and you are 100% completely stuck with them. As far as level design goes, this game is sometimes a more straightforward platforming affair, and sometimes an incredibly bare bones collectathon. Speaking of bare bones, there's hardly anything in this game. The game is comprised of 6 levels. Yes, you heard me. 6. Most of the levels are 5 to 10 minutes, but the game makes up for that by having a couple of them go on forever. But even with the couple of levels that drag like crazy or are artificially extended, the game is over pretty quickly. You can breeze through this game in around an hour, which would be fine for an Amiga or Super Nintendo style side-scroller, but not for a 6th-gen platformer with an asking price of $50. However, despite not being as open-ended as something like Mario 64, the level design is still a bit too open and there's a bit too many twists and turns for a fixed camera to work over an adjustable one, and throughout the game, you will be constantly reminded of this. There are parts like here where you're on a circular landmass surrounded by a bottomless pit. There's a tower in the middle of the landmass so you can't see the other side. In order to beat the level, which is not conveyed to the player at all, you have to know to walk away from the central landmass onto paths you can't see, and if you walk off at any other point, you die. Also, seeing how the game tells you absolutely nothing at this point, the only way I found this out was by complete fluke.
It's a leap of faith. You must believe, boy. You must believe.
Granted, now that I've played through this level multiple times, I know where the paths are, as there are landmarks to go off of, but chances are first-time players, especially kids, aren't going to pick up on the presence of gray tiles, meaning that this is where the non-conveyed paths are. Not only that, but navigating these paths can be a pain because the camera doesn't adjust behind Jimmy, and he's very close to the bottom of the screen, so it becomes a painful exercise of navigating the paths while hoping that you don't fall off the very next second, as it's not particularly easy to tell where the paths stop and the pit begins. Also, not helping is the fact that you have to do this 4 times and in sequence, so chances are the camera will pan to reveal a big steel door in your face. However, when you can see your surroundings better, the camera then faces you with another problem: depth perception. They picked the worst goddamn angles for a lot of the platforming in this game, and because of this, it's hard to tell where you are in relation to your surroundings when jumping. This, of course, results in a lot of cheap deaths, but you're going to find that there's pretty much no other kind of death in this game. That, and even in the rare event of the camera not being so much of a problem, it becomes clear that the level design is nothing short of atrocious. Whenever I meet someone else who had this game as a kid, I always hear the same thing. Oh yeah, I had that game. It was shit. I couldn't get past that jump in the anthill. Now, Let's talk about the anthill. The second level takes place in Jimmy's home as he learns about the aliens kidnapping the world's parents. To make matters worse, pieces to his rocket have been stolen. So he set off to find 3 pieces of Jimmy's rocket and mutilate Carl for life. Now, 2 of the 3 pieces are pretty easy to get. One of them is in Jimmy's room, one of them you get on top of the lab entrance with Goddard's pogo stick mode, but then you have to get the other one inside of a big anthill with giant ants that's just randomly in Jimmy's lab for some reason. Remember the scene with the giant ants in Jimmy Neutron? I remember the scene with the giant ants in Jimmy Neutron. That was the best scene of the movie. So you navigate this labyrinth and eventually get to this jump that you have to get across in order to get the piece. I will repeat that. You're seeing this jump. You see just how well it complements Jimmy's jump arc. You have to somehow make this jump in order to progress in the game. Despite getting over it numerous times, I can't for the life of me articulate how such a task is done. Mainly because I don't even understand what's happening when I do. Like many 3D platformers, Jimmy's jump arc is fixed. You press the button, and no matter how hard you do it or how long, he will jump to the same height. However, given that, it seems like you get on top of this platform at complete random. Even if you jump from the farthest point, sometimes you get on top, and other times you're way off, regardless of whether or not you're putting in the same input. Sometimes there's a magic spot where it'll work perfectly, but there are other times where I go to jump from that point and it won't work. And sometimes I find another one, but sometimes that one won't work. In all honesty, this is probably the most horrifically poorly placed platform I have ever seen in a platform game. Who needs good platform placement in a platformer? The same people who need good tracks and controls in a racing game. Losers, that's who! However, when you have the bad camera angles and the bad level design together at full force, this game proves to be one of the most agonizing tests of endurance I can comprehend in this genre. Welcome, one and all, to the room of gears and fans. This is where the depth perception is at its worst. Every single jump is a leap of faith, and it certainly doesn't help how poorly the rotating objects match up. If you die in this long hellhole of a room, you will start all the way from the beginning. The entire time, you see the other end of the room, mercilessly taunting the inner depths of your soul. When you manage to get across to that point, you're greeted with cheap death, of course. Now you have to do that all over again. Even by licensed platformer standards, this is beyond low. And unfortunately, we're not done yet. Now, we have to defeat Pultra by tricking him into pecking these turret guys, which works for some reason, before facing off the most epic final boss ever. And that was Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius for the GameCube and PlayStation 2. Yikes. I know that licensed platformers based off of kids shows are typically just mediocre, rushed out cash grabs, but this isn't mediocre. This makes mediocrity look amazing. Even with the low expectations set forth by other games of this variety, this is inexcusably terrible. This is one of the worst 3D platformers I've ever played. I can't even say it feels unfinished. This feels like an alpha build that was rushed out in a month of development. In fact, what was the process even like? What happened here? Well, as I said earlier, not much information is out there, but this is what I was able to gather. This game was released in September of 2002. The developers Big Sky Interactive were founded in May of 2002. Also, keep in mind that in order to distribute a game, you need to have the game finished a full month before the release date, so at latest the game would need to have been done by August. Then there's the matter of setting up the company, acquiring the license, handling pre-production, which is apparently kind of like a board game. So how much time does that leave programming, graphics, and design? So could it be that this game was rushed out in a few months at most? It would make perfect sense, wouldn't it? But unfortunately, life makes no sense, and that's not what happened. Remember when I mentioned the Cutting Room Floor? Well, it's a website that uploads unused files and source code from games to the internet to show people interesting things about the development of specific games and what didn't make it in. It appears that they started working on this game while they were still the US branch of Callisto, and within part of a source code, I managed to find a development log, and this game started development in 2000. They spent almost 2 years on this game. This, what you're seeing before you, took 2 years to make. That's almost depressing. I mean, look at Rogue Leader. This game was crammed into existence within less than 8 months, and not only is it polished and fun, but it's still known today for its action, outstanding film-to-gameplay translations, and for being one of the most impressive games on the GameCube. This game even came out a year before Jimmy Neutron. Hell, even Sonic 06, with its insanely rushed, chaotic, and disastrous development life, has so much more to show for it. Yeah, when I said that this is one of the worst 3D platforms I've ever played, I meant it, because it actually makes Sonic 06 look outstanding, and that is not hyperbole or exaggeration. I hope that there's some crazy story behind this game to justify the state of it. I mean, you have to be really smart to program, that's a given, but it's hard for me to imagine intelligent people taking so long to turn out a game in this state, look at it and say, oh yeah, this is good enough, unless there were serious problems behind the scenes. In its defense, while Jimmy Neutron is well beyond terrible, it was made by people who could actually program to some degree and doesn't come across as malicious, nor does it do anything illegal, which puts it above some of the other games I have covered. It does, however, come across as desperately unfinished and like a very, very rough alpha build or prototype test, and I can't recommend it at all unless you are intentionally looking for a horrifically bad platformer.
Lord Vader, can you hear me?
Yes. Are you going to finish that croissant?
I ate it.
Good morning to you! Good morning!